Some very worrying allegations have arisen concerning actions of Games Workshop in a lawsuit they entered into in January 2025 against an Italian company making STL miniatures. The miniature creator himself, whose video is up on screen right now, GHAMAK, alleges that Games Workshop is suing him not for copyright infringement, but rather that Games Workshop is stating that the production of models that could be used to play games of Warhammer 40,000 is in and of itself illegal. So if you are anyone who creates models of 32mm or that looks like they could be used for 40k, this could then be, Games Workshop says, be illegal, regardless of the copyright infringement element of it. This is an enormous legal overstep, as of course you should be free to use whatever sticks, stones or Lego bricks you wish to use to play games of Warhammer 40,000 in your own home with your own friends, and Games Workshop has no rights whatsoever to enforce any standards on that. They can do so at their own official tournaments, sure, and their own official shops, sure, but they cannot go on the internet, find something that looks like it could be used for 40k, and then sue them for that, obviously. Now, there are a couple parts of this lawsuit that, well, both from Games Workshop perspective and from GHAMAK's perspective, that are not great on multiple sides, but let's have a look at the video first, and then we'll get into a little bit of the details and, perhaps most worryingly, a bit of a lack of details.
Hi, I'm Francesco Pizzo and I've been sculpting miniatures since 2002. It started as a hobby and gradually became my life work. My first model was rough, but I was proud of it. I kept learning, first with green stuff and Fimo, then with Blender and ZBrush. I worked for many companies like Paolo Parente Dust Studios, Ludus Magnus, and even received an offer from Games Workshop through Forge World, but I didn't accept it to stay close to my family in Italy. In 2018, I launched GHAMAK, a Patreon where I released originally sculpted 3D printable miniatures for war games, RPG and collectors. It was meant to be a side project, but it grew into a full-time job, where I no longer work alone, but with a team of about 12 people. In 2023, I received a legal letter from Games Workshop. They initially accused me of infringing copyright on their models. They wanted nearly 90% of our catalog removed without providing a specific list. They requested all data on our business and collaborators, and demanded we sign away our creative rights for the future. We tried it over and over to start a dialogue, but they refused. Now Games Workshop have taken me to court, not for copyright infringement, but claim I was engaging in an unfair competition, all because my miniatures could also be used in their games. They are not simply targeting my life's work on GHAMAK. This is a challenge to the very idea that an independent creator can offer alternative miniatures compatible with their games. I believe this is wrong, and if we don't fight back...
Okay, so that's the meat and potatoes of the case, so to say. Right. He had an offer from Games Workshop, from Forge World. That's probably how they knew who he was to begin with. Then he started making his own models and had significant success. If you're, having 12 people on your team, you are earning quite a bit of money, which is probably why Games Workshop also then thought, okay, there's something to gain here. He then says that Games Workshop originally sent in essence, cease and desist, saying you are violating our copyright, here is a list of things, and he claims 90%, but also says that Games Workshop didn't actually send a specific list of what things should be removed, and presumably for what reasons. Alright. He also then goes on to say that they are now not suing him for copyright infringement, but rather for creating models that could be used as alternatives. Alright. There's some things that we need to look at here. He does have a GoFundMe up, but I do warn you, because this is normally one of those things that I would like to support as well, but there are parts of this that I'm not particularly fond of. First and foremost, as I've watched the rest of this, he doesn't say where this lawsuit is taking place, which means that we don't have any way of getting access to the legal documents, which we do need to see here because this sounds like an absurd allegation. I cannot imagine that Games Workshop would put forth the legal argument that they own the rights to dictate what models you can use in your tabletop wargames. Copyright infringement, sure, but unfair competition? Now, here's from Italy. Italy has a very strict copyright control system that is stacked almost exclusively in the favor of the person owning the copyright. They have no equivalent whatsoever, say for example, of fair use, basically. So perhaps it's an Italian court, which would be unusual. Normally, Games Workshop would either go to England or to the US, where they have an easier time suing people. We can also then look at the miniatures in question. So this is GHAMAK's site, and immediately there are some pretty significant problems with models like these, and we can go on My Mini Factory. Now, a lot of this is perfectly fine and perfectly original. For example, the corrupted guard thing over here, for example. This doesn't look like anything Games Workshop is producing. He also has examples at the bottom of his GoFundMe, like this for example. This looks perfectly fine, this looks perfectly fine. You don't have any copyright over big eagles, obviously, but then you do have some things, like I think, like the tanks. This is a Predator, these are Baneblades, and this one, Temple Ranged Exterminators. To put it like this, I would never, in my wildest, craziest dreams, even attempt to monetize this. To determine, it's always very difficult to determine copyright, right? Because it's a very complex question. It has a lot of ifs and buts and what ifs and exceptions to the rules, etc. And it often comes down to simple interpretation. But a good rule of thumb is that if an everyday man who has no real knowledge about Warhammer 40k or the alternative being presented can look at a model and look at, in this case, like Terminators with a Black Templar tint to them, if they can look at that and go, yeah, that looks like 40k, you're in trouble. If they are not immediately visually distinct to a layman, you do have an issue. And this, I would not take this to court. I would not take this to court anywhere in the world and hope to win. I would not. Other things like the Blighted Mausoleum, of course you can make mausoleums. Games Workshop does not own the copyright of mausoleums. Games Workshop does not own... this one too. Again, even the pose is damn near identical to Elder Titans, or Eldar Titans. Again, I'm not in a million years. Not in a million fucking years would I take this to court. But, again, the allegation here is, and this is why we have to see the legal paperwork before we can really tell for sure here, is that Games Workshop is suing him not for copyright infringement. That's the big thing. Not copyright infringement, but unfair competition. And exactly what that means is a little bit unclear, because again, Games Workshop has no legal right, no legal privilege just to determine what models you use in the comfort of your own home. If you want to use this model, even if we say, as a theoretical example, that these are Black Templar models and every court in the land would agree, that still does not allow Games Workshop to take them down if you wish to utilize them in your own home. For copyright infringement, yes. For merely allowing you to purchase them, no. Now, he also makes the claim, of course, that this is an attack upon creatives all over the place. Now, again, very much so depends, because if you have a judgment in one place in Europe, for example in Italy, that does not make it legal precedence in all other countries in the European Union. The EU legal system is superior to the national one, but the national one on an independent basis you can't enforce a ruling in Italy on Sweden, say, for example, or in UK upon France and so on. Now, in the US would be somewhat different because you're covering a much larger potential territory there, but the precedence argument too is a bit vague here as well. So I think this is worth talking about and pointing out and illuminating, and also, showing off the GoFundMe here in case you are so inclined, because if this is true, it is very serious, and it is again an enormous overstep by Games Workshop deep into completely unexplored legal territory here. But it does sound too crazy to be true. That doesn't mean that it isn't true. Games Workshop has, in their last batch of 250 lawsuits, launched a lawsuit against a Battletech miniature called a Warhammer. So I will not put any insanity beyond Games Workshop, but we need to see specifics on this case. That is very, very, very important, especially in the case where, again, a lot of this is fine, but a lot of this too, I would never take to court. Not in a million years. So this one's a little bit weird to me, but again, wanted to talk about it, and for now, I will leave it up to your judgment to decide whether or not this looks like a genuine overstep by GW, or whether or not there's a little bit too much iffiness in this case for you to make any decision either for or against, as that is very much so my position at the moment too. But still, do let me know actually in the comment section down below how you feel about this, because I'm very, very divided on it as well, and you know me, I'm usually not a big defender of Games Workshop or corporations in general. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.